Illinois has made a assistant coach hire. Coach David Gibbs from the Central Florida, I think they're still called the Golden Knights, is the new addition on Bret Bielema's staff. As some of you know, about a week or two ago, Coach Andy Boo and a secondary coach, Antonio Finellis, were let go, and Bret didn't waste too much time hiring one of the replacements. And I mentioned earlier on Twitter that once this hiring was made official by the University of Illinois, that I was going to do some homework. And I thought, you know what? Instead of me studying and doing my own homework, why don't I bring in a little cheat code? And I'm going to go ahead and welcome a special guest, Mat Pistole. I hope I pronounced that right, Matt. He
Yep.
is sorry. What if you're familiar with him, he's basically a coach encyclopedia. There's no name that he's unfamiliar with, and he knows the ins and outs about a lot of the coaches in the country. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Honestly, Wikipedia is a great tool. I'm just throwing that out there.
Matt, this hire kind of came out of nowhere. Once we were looking for replacements, I was trying to do a little rudimentary research on who the possible names were, and there were names that were coming up a little more often than others, and that those hirings did not happen. And Coach Bret, who tends to run a pretty tight ship, made this hiring essentially out of nowhere. So let me ask you, what can you tell us about Coach Gibbs?
One kind of caught me off guard as well. I wasn't. This wasn't a name that was at the top of my list necessarily. I thought Kerry Cooks made a ton of sense just
That was the
based upon
name I
his
was referencing.
availability. Yeah, and I thought for this role it was kind of a done deal, but clearly I was wrong. But David Gibbs actually has a lot of connections to the staff, and he worked with Terrence Jamison at Texas Tech. He also has connections with Ryan Walters, and he worked with Ryan Walters. He was actually Ryan Walters' dad's teammate at Colorado, which is an interesting tidbit there. And he's actually the son of one of the most legendary offensive line coaches in the history of football, and Alex Gibbs, who pretty much invented the wide zone that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and that whole crew still runs today. He invented that, so that's his father. He's worked 9, 10 years in the NFL. He's been a defensive coordinator at a high level for 10 plus years, and honestly is probably the thing that's most notable to me right at the moment, and what I think is very interesting is he's been a defensive back coach in his last three guys that he shared a defensive back job with was Ryan Walters, Travis Williams, who's now the defensive coordinator at Arkansas, considered an up and coming defensive coordinator, and then Addison Williams, who was the defense coordinator still at UCF and had a really great year as the coordinator there in his first season, and is considered fast riser that before this is all said and done might get promotion up into the Power Four conference level also. And so bringing him in to work with Aaron Henry makes a ton of sense from that sense. And it wouldn't surprise me. I think probably where the connection began, and when Bret Bielema says he's known him for about 30 years, he mentioned that Tony Peterson was a guy that he was around on the recruiting trail way back in the day. David Gibbs was also on that Minnesota staff, was the defensive coordinator on that Minnesota staff. And so probably the connection there and when Coach Bielema probably met David Gibbs was probably during that time.
So my feeling is obviously, Aaron Henry had, let's just say, to be kind, a rough year, his first year as a defensive coordinator, and his defensive backs coach was obviously a first year guy, Antonio Finellis, and Bret was pretty quick on making that switch, bringing in a veteran presence. Do you think that's kind of a move almost to help Aaron Henry to get some more experience in the defensive coaching room, just to help him guide him to become a better defensive coordinator in general?
Oh, I think so. I don't think that means that Antonio Finellis isn't going to be a great defensive back coach, because he probably will be, and I'm sure Bret Bielema will continue to try to support him. He played for him, and I'm sure he's still close with the guys. It just wasn't the right fit, and it wasn't what the coaching staff needed. And kudos to Coach Bielema for being quick to make decisions what's best for the Illinois football program, and not necessarily keeping his buddies around, which is not something that every coach does. Coming from somebody who follows coaching searches pretty closely, but I think most importantly, he needed another guy in that defensive back room that was a teacher, potentially that he could even take over coaching the safeties for Aaron Henry, which we know Ryan Walters did an unbelievable job coaching safeties. And I know that was um, David Gibbs' specialty at UCF. I didn't really get a chance to see if that's what he did at Missouri as well. He focused on the safeties because typically when you have two DB coaches, they'll split it up. But he obviously has some experience coaching safety, so potentially that frees up Aaron Henry to go back to more of his natural position that he did a really good job of at coaching the cornerbacks, and then David Gibbs takes over the safeties, and that makes a ton of sense to me. And then you're also bringing somebody in the room that has called plays at a really high level, has called a lot of plays, understands what that's like, can really mentor and help groom Aaron Henry and make him much better at his job as the coordinator. And I think that's really beneficial as well.
Speaking of calling plays, Bret did talk about once the season concluded, kind of reevaluating the defense and seeing if like adjustments needed to be made, whether other teams in the conference had kind of figured them out. Do you think hiring David Gibbs could be kind of a signal that they are going to change a few things on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that you're probably going to see them try to disguise things a little bit more and be a little bit more multiple. I think they'll probably try to be more multiple in the front seven than they are in the back four or five. That's just my personal opinion because I think what they're going to try to do in the secondary is they got some young guys that are very very talented. They need them taught better. They need to be better, fundamentally sound. They need to be able to execute at a higher level, and they need to take the ball away. You saw on Twitter that Terrence Jameson alluded to. They just didn't take the ball away. They got to figure out ways to do that. But I think from a disguising standpoint, I think bringing in new, fresh ideas. David Gibbs hasn't worked with Bret Bielema directly. He can bring in some different ideas and some different schematic things that can certainly help us. But yeah, you're going to see a reinventing of this entire defense when it's all said and done.
I did. We do have a question from Twitter. Big Ten Kurt, one of the hosts from one of my favorite Big Ten shows, Eyes on the Big Ten, asked, "Do you know anything about his recruiting?"
Not a ton. That's not necessarily my specialty. If you follow me, my posts, I'm not this huge recruiting guy. I think that gets a little bit overblown at times. It's just more about the right fits and what I have seen. He's he's been around the recruiting game for a really long time. It sounds like he focuses on really making the family the emphasis, which should sound familiar. Meaning he's probably a pretty good fit for Bret Bielema's staff because I think that's something that's important to them. He's 55 typically in the recruiting game. It's a young man's sport for the most part, but I think recruiting is changing all the time, especially with the NIL and that stuff now that I don't know if in how much the off the field personnel is now involved in recruiting that, it's not like it used to be that the on the field coaches took all the responsibility and really had to build the relationships. It certainly plays a part, but there are so many people that touch these recruits that have to build a relationship, and it's more of a team thing than just one guy. And I think David Gibbs will be tremendous as far as doing his part. And if you say anything about the guys, he's a worker from the looks of things. And so I think he's going to put in all the effort you need, and he's going to certainly know how to evaluate the talent as well.
Kurt, just to somewhat answer your question, I see that his main recruiting ties are in Texas and Florida, which kind of makes for Finellis was one of our main contacts out in Florida, so it looks like Bret's going to keep trying to fish down, get those athletes out of that state. And the average recruit ranking for the guys he landed was about 87, which again it's not too bad.
Yep.
Coach Matt, last question: what do you think of the hire?
Really good hire. I think it's what we needed for that position, and I think it's just a really good fit. I think Bret has a really good feel for what he needs, and when you make that quick a decision, you don't let go of a former player, and someone that you think really highly of. How much did he talk very highly of Antonio Finellis last offseason? You don't let him go that fast if you weren't very sure on something missing on your staff, and so it's very clear with this hire what they needed. They wanted a veteran presence with experience, that was a great teacher, that can really come in and not only groom these young defensive backs that are really talented, but also a really talented young defensive coordinator that I think could do a lot of really, really good things in this industry. And so overall, it's what we needed. Now onto the inside linebacker job, which could be just about anybody. So,
and hopefully I can bother you to come back on once we make that hire. Uh,
sure, sure.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
Where can our viewers find you?
I guess I'm on Twitter, Coach Pistol at Coach Pistol. Other than that, I'm on the boards quite often, probably more than I need to be. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you again for coming on, and thank you for folks for watching. Please, if you don't mind, give me a like, hit that subscribe button. I need to hit that magic 1,000 subscribers. Until I do that, YouTube doesn't care about little channels like mine. Until then, we'll see you later.